Hey guys, tonight you're not sleeping in a warm bed or a quiet house. Instead, you're climbing through freezing rain toward a medieval castle where the walls sweat with cold, the straw smells damp, and the fire barely reaches the corners of the hall. Somewhere beyond the battlements, wolves howl through the winter mist, and honestly, medieval travel brochures completely oversold this experience. So before we step inside and try not to freeze to death beside a smoky hearth, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these slow, immersive journeys through history. And while the castle gates creak open tonight, let me know your location and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, settle in, and let the storm carry you back into the cold medieval night. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the looming shadow of a medieval castle, while winter mist crawls slowly across the frozen ground like pale smoke from an unseen fire. Your boots sink into mud stiffened by frost, and the cold reaches through your cloak with the determination of a tax collector who suspects you are hiding one extra coin somewhere in your sleeve. Above you, narrow torch flames tremble against black stone walls slick with dampness, while somewhere far beyond the battlements a monastery bell groans softly through the dark valley air. The smell is a mixture of wet hay, horse sweat, wood smoke, and the faint sour scent of too many people living too close together for too many winters. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. A cart rattles past you toward the gatehouse, its wheels grinding through slush while two exhausted oxen breathe clouds into the night. You can already feel the ache in your shoulders from the cold alone, and honestly, you probably would not last a week out here before begging a monk for soup and emotional support. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the wind whistles through these old stones, feel free to comment your location and local time as you settle in for tonight's journey. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The castle gate ahead of you creaks open with all the grace of an ancient oak tree deciding whether to fall over. Iron chains groan overhead. Torchlight spills across the muddy road, turning puddles into pools of trembling gold. Two guards wrapped in fur-lined cloaks stare down from the gatehouse platform with expressions suggesting they have not slept warmly since childhood. You lower your head against the wind and continue forward. The stone archway swallows you whole for a moment. The ceiling above is blackened with centuries of soot. Meltwater drips steadily from cracks between the stones, tapping onto the ground in slow rhythm. Somewhere nearby, a horse stamps impatiently. Somewhere farther off, someone coughs the deep, terrible cough of a lifelong resident of smoky halls. As you emerge inside the outer gate, the castle opens around you like a dark little world unto itself. Wooden galleries cling to the inner walls. Thin ribbons of smoke curl upward from kitchens and workshops. Lanterns sway in the wind beside stairways slick with frost. You pass beneath a hanging iron cage left empty tonight, though no one can quite agree whether it once held thieves, rebels, or merely unlucky travellers who annoyed the wrong lord. Some swear the cage whistles during storms even when the air is still. The guards at the gate barely acknowledge you. One sits on his stool warming his hands over a clay brazier, his beard silvered with frost. The other scratches lazily at a mangy dog curled beside the wall. The dog opens one eye as you pass, then decides you're probably not carrying enough food to matter. You cannot blame him. The cold here feels alive. It crawls beneath your cloak and settles into your joints with ancient patience. Every stone around you seems to breathe winter back into the air. Even the torches struggle against it, their flames bending sideways whenever the wind cuts through the yard. A servant hurries past carrying a bundle of rushes meant for the hall floors. Fresh rushes are one of the castle's few luxuries during winter. The old layers beneath are already packed with ash, grease, mud, spilled ale, dog fur, and whatever else generations of boots have pressed into them. Medieval housekeeping standards are less deep clean, and more cover the smell with herbs and hope for divine mercy. You hear distant laughter from somewhere deeper inside the castle, followed by the sharp clang of metal striking metal. Perhaps a smith still works near the kitchens. Perhaps soldiers gamble beside the barracks. Life continues stubbornly inside these walls despite the season. Above the battlements, snow clouds drift across the moon. You pause near the centre of the yard where a frozen well stands wrapped in rope. The stone lip is glazed with ice. Nearby, several chickens huddle miserably beneath an overturned cart. A stable boy no older than 12 drags a sack of oats toward the stables while muttering prayers to St. Eligius, patron of horses and metal workers. In winter, castle folk pray constantly to saints connected with warmth, food, healthy animals, and not freezing to death overnight. A fair strategy, honestly. The stable itself glows with warmer light than the yard outside. You catch the smell before anything else: hay, manure, damp leather, horse breath, and smoke drifting from a tiny servant fire near the wall. For one brief moment, it almost smells comforting. A woman carrying a wooden bucket brushes past you without slowing. Tiny charms woven from twine and dried herbs dangle from the bucket handle. Some swear rosemary keeps evil spirits from souring milk. Others insist garlic near a stable door prevents witches from riding horses at night. Even now, it's hard to tell whether people truly believe these things or simply feel safer pretending they do. The wind rises again. Far overhead, the castle banners crack sharply in the dark. Their colours are impossible to distinguish at night, reduced to silhouettes snapping against the sky. You look upward toward the highest tower where a single narrow window glows faintly amber behind shuttered wood. Someone up there is warm. Probably. Or at least less cold. You continue across the bailey slowly, boots crunching through frozen straw and patches of ice. The deeper you move into the castle grounds, the more sounds begin layering together: distant voices, barking dogs, the creak of wagon wheels, clattering pots from the kitchens, the endless murmur of wind moving through stone passageways. And beneath all of it lies another sound. Water, somewhere beyond the walls, hidden by darkness. The river moves steadily through the valley below the castle. You cannot see it, but the noise drifts upward faintly with the mist. Travellers often trusted rivers to guide them through unfamiliar land at night. Some believed spirits lived within running water and carried whispers from village to village beneath the moon. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such spirits helped travellers or merely watched them disappear. Ahead, the heavy doors of the great hall glow with firelight leaking through their edges. Warmth waits there, or at least the medieval version of warmth, which usually means one side of your body slowly roasting while the other freezes solid. Still, compared to the yard outside, it feels almost heavenly. You tighten your cloak, lower your head against another burst of wind, and make your way toward the hall as snow begins drifting softly through the torchlight behind you. The great hall doors remain behind you for now, glowing warmly across the yard like the promise of salvation delivered in the form of soup and a slightly less miserable temperature. But first you must cross the outer bailey completely, and the castle seems determined to make you earn every scrap of comfort one frozen step at a time. The muddy ground shifts beneath your boots where countless carts, horses, and servants have churned the earth into a permanent battlefield between dirt and straw. Thin ice cracks beneath each careful step. Torchlight wavers along puddles black as ink. Somewhere nearby, a mule lets out a long, offended cry that sounds remarkably like a man discovering his taxes have doubled. To your left stretches the stable row, low-roofed and steaming gently in the winter dark. Lanterns hang from hooks beside the stable doors, their dim yellow light catching clouds of horse breath drifting upward into the cold. Grooms move back and forth carrying buckets, armfuls of hay, and stiff brushes worn nearly smooth from years of use. You slow near the nearest stable entrance, partly because your feet ache from the cold, and partly because the warmth spilling from inside is impossible to resist. Within, horses stamp against packed earth floors layered thick with straw. Their tack hangs from wooden pegs darkened by grease and age. A sleepy stable hand rubs down a chestnut mare while muttering complaints about frozen water troughs. Nearby, another servant carefully checks a horse's hooves for cracks. Medieval horses suffer terribly during harsh winters, and castle folk often care for them with greater urgency than they care for one another. A fair number of medieval lords, if forced to choose between feeding a traveller or feeding a warhorse, would probably ask whether the traveller at least knows how to carry supplies uphill. The stable hand glances at you briefly, then returns to his work. His fingers are wrapped with strips of wool against the cold. Hanging above him from a beam is a tiny carved charm shaped like a horse head. Some swear such carvings protect animals from night spirits that creep into barns during winter storms. Others claim they merely keep rats away. No one can quite agree whether either explanation has ever worked. A dog suddenly trots from beneath one of the stalls and falls into step beside you. It is the same scruffy creature you noticed near the gatehouse earlier, brown-furred and thin but determined, with one torn ear and the deeply suspicious eyes of something accustomed to surviving on scraps and bad decisions. The dog sniffs your cloak hopefully. You have no food. The dog looks disappointed but continues following you anyway, which feels strangely flattering. Outside again, the wind cuts sharply across the open yard. You pass beneath a wooden gallery where servants hurry overhead carrying bundles of firewood toward the kitchens. Ash drifts downward through the slats. Somewhere above, someone laughs loudly enough to earn an immediate shouted warning to keep quiet before the steward hears. Stewards, after all, are among the few creatures in medieval castles more feared than winter itself. The kitchens lie farther ahead beside the hall, their chimneys pouring thick smoke into the night sky. The smell reaches you long before the building does. Onions boiling in broth, roasting meat, damp ashes, yeast bread, and old grease soaked permanently into the walls. It is the smell of survival. Near the kitchen entrance, two women kneel beside barrels of salted fish, arguing softly while scraping scales into a bucket already half frozen over. One pauses to cross herself as a gust of wind rattles the nearby shutters. "Bad air tonight," she mutters. The other nods immediately. Many people believe winter winds carry sickness through castle walls. Some hang bundles of herbs near windows. Others burn juniper branches to cleanse the air. A few simply drink enough ale to stop worrying about it entirely. Honestly, that last method appears extremely popular. A cluster of servants crowds around a tiny fire pit sheltered behind stacked barrels. They warm their hands while chewing coarse bread dark with rye flour. One man holds his boots toward the flames, steam rising slowly from the leather. Another scratches at frostbite along his knuckles with the exhausted resignation of someone who has accepted discomfort as a permanent feature of existence. You drift onward. The deeper corners of the bailey grow darker now, touched only by distant torchlight. Storage sheds crouch against the walls beneath layers of frost. Iron-bound carts stand abandoned beside stacks of chopped wood. Above everything looms the keep itself, rising from the centre of the castle like a mountain carved from shadow. Its upper windows glow faintly golden. Its lower stones vanish into darkness. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the place feels protective or threatening. Castles are built for safety, certainly, but also for war, imprisonment, suspicion, and power. Every thick wall meant to keep enemies out can just as easily keep frightened people trapped inside. You pass a narrow stair leading upward along the battlements. A pair of guards descend slowly carrying spears and lanterns. Their cloaks snap sharply in the wind. One nods toward the sky. "Snow before dawn," he mutters. The other grimaces, "Saints preserve us." Both men smell strongly of smoke, wet wool, and stale ale. One carries a small leather pouch tied with red thread around his neck. You recognize it as a charm pouch, likely filled with herbs, saints' relic fragments, or written prayers. Soldiers across medieval Europe carry such things constantly. Some swear battlefield wounds heal faster when touched by relics. Others insist iron nails from church doors protect against curses. And many quietly trust charms more than physicians. Not entirely unreasonable, considering medieval medicine occasionally involves bleeding you with leeches until everyone involved becomes lightheaded. The guards continue past you toward the gatehouse, boots ringing against frozen stones. The dog remains beside you. Ahead, the yard widens briefly around a half-frozen fountain whose water has become a twisted pillar of ice. Frost clings to every surface. Candle lanterns flicker weakly beside doorways. Somewhere overhead, laundry forgotten on a line snaps stiffly in the wind like frozen flags of surrender. You finally near the great hall entrance. The oak doors tower above you, banded with black iron and scarred by generations of weather. A pair of torch brackets crackles beside the archway. Melted snow drips steadily from the stone lions carved overhead, their faces softened by centuries of rain. Two servants struggle to drag in another cartload of firewood before the storm deepens. One notices the dog trailing you and tosses it a crust of bread. The animal catches it instantly and finally abandons you for more promising company. A betrayal, honestly? Still, you cannot blame him. In a medieval castle, loyalty often follows whoever currently possesses food. You place one hand against the heavy hall door. The wood feels cold despite the firelight glowing beyond it. From inside comes the muffled roar of voices, clattering cups, barking laughter, and the low, steady crackle of enormous hearth fires. Warmth, noise, smoke, crowds. For better or worse, you are about to step fully inside castle life. The wind howls once behind you across the darkened bailey as though reluctant to let you go. Then the hall doors slowly begin to open. The great hall doors open with a deep wooden groan, and warmth rushes over you so suddenly that your face almost stings from it. Not true warmth, of course. Medieval castles specialize in a very specific kind of heating where enormous fires somehow leave both smoke and frost equally determined to occupy the same room. Still, compared to the frozen bailey outside, the hall feels nearly luxurious. You step inside carefully. The first thing you notice is the sound. Voices crash together beneath the high-timbered ceiling in a one endless tide of conversation. Laughter, coughing, barking dogs, scraping benches, clattering trenchers, and servants shouting over one another near the kitchens. Somewhere farther back, a harp struggles bravely against the noise while a singer with questionable pitch attempts a ballad about a knight who apparently dies of heartbreak, poor decisions, or possibly both. The second thing you notice is the smoke. It drifts thickly through the rafters in pale layers, trapped beneath the roof where narrow vents fail heroically to remove it. Your eyes sting immediately. Nearly every medieval hall carries this smell: wood smoke, damp wool, spilled ale, tallow grease, wet leather, and bodies packed too closely together through a long winter evening. Rushes cover the stone floor beneath your boots, though fresh is perhaps too generous a description. Layers of old straw, herbs, ash, and dirt compressed together beneath centuries of footsteps. Lavender and sweet rush are scattered across parts of the hall to improve the smell. The effort is admirable. Not entirely successful, but admirable. At the centre of the hall, a vast hearth fire crackles beneath a hanging iron vent hood blackened by soot. Several hounds sleep beside the flames, twitching occasionally in dreams of chasing rabbits or stealing sausages. One opens a lazy eye as you pass, judges you harmless, and returns immediately to sleep. Around the long wooden tables sit soldiers, servants, travellers, merchants, minor officials, and castle retainers wrapped in cloaks of wool and fur. Steam rises from bowls of pottage. Ale sloshes between cups. A servant slices dark bread with a knife nearly as long as your forearm. You edge farther inside, grateful simply to thaw. The hall walls disappear upward into shadows where faded banners hang beside iron torch brackets. Saints stare down from painted wooden carvings darkened with age and smoke. Near the dais at the far end of the chamber, a pair of scribes sits hunched over wax tablets recording supplies and payments by candlelight, their fingers stained black with ink. Even in winter, even at night, somewhere in every medieval castle, an exhausted clerk is quietly suffering. You remove your gloves slowly near the fire, flexing numb fingers while heat seeps painfully back into your skin. Beside you, an elderly man warms his boots against the hearthstones while sipping ale from a dented cup. "Bad roads?" he asks without looking up. You nod once. He snorts knowingly. "They're all bad roads." A remarkably efficient summary of medieval travel. Nearby, servants weave through the crowded hall carrying steaming cauldrons suspended from poles. The smell of supper thickens the air onions, barley, cabbage, leeks, smoked fish, and thick brown broth heavy with whatever vegetables survived storage cellars this winter. You catch hints of rosemary and sage beneath the richer scents. A young kitchen boy nearly slips beside the hearth but recovers at the last second, earning applause from nearby soldiers. One tosses him a walnut as reward. At another table, two merchants argue quietly over market tolls charged at river crossings farther south. Their cloaks are trimmed with rabbit fur gone damp from snow. One absent-mindedly fingers a pilgrim badge pinned to his sleeve, stamped with the image of a distant saint. Pilgrims carry such badges proudly after visiting holy shrines. Some believe the badges protect travellers from robbers or sickness. Others simply enjoy proving they survived terrible roads, questionable inns, and monks who charge suspicious amounts for watered ale. No one can quite agree whether pilgrimage strengthens the soul or merely ruins the feet. A servant gestures for you toward an open place along one of the lower tables. You settle onto the hard wooden bench gratefully while another servant places a trencher before you. The bread is stale enough to qualify as construction material, but it smells wonderful anyway. Steam curls upward from a bowl of pottage set beside it. You wrap chilled hands around the bowl carefully. The heat alone feels miraculous. Across from you sits a broad-shouldered guard with a nose that has clearly lost several arguments over the years. He tears into smoked fish while listening to an older woman recount a story near the end of the table. "And I tell you," the woman whispers dramatically, "the relic bled straight through the cloth." The guard rolls his eyes. "You say every relic bleeds. This one did. Probably damp. Several nearby listeners nod thoughtfully anyway. Relics hold enormous power in medieval life. Bones, scraps of clothing, saintly teeth, tiny vials of oil, fragments of old wood supposedly touched by holy figures. Every monastery and chapel treasures them. Some are undoubtedly genuine. Others perhaps require a slightly more flexible relationship with truth. Still, when winter sickness spreads through crowded castles, even skeptical people suddenly become remarkably interested in miracle-working finger bones. You dip coarse bread into the pottage. It tastes of onion, barley, and smoke. Perfect. Near the far hearth, a group of musicians attempts another song while several soldiers clap badly along. One man dances briefly before tripping over a sleeping dog and collapsing onto the rushes to tremendous applause. The dog barely reacts. Clearly a professional. A sudden draft sweeps through the hall as the outer doors open again behind you. Snowflakes whirl inward briefly before the doors slam shut. Several people groan at the burst of cold. You glance toward the entrance. A pair of travellers enters wrapped heavily in cloaks crusted with snow. Their faces are pale with exhaustion. One carries a wooden staff hung with tiny bells and charms. The other limps noticeably. The hall watches them with quiet curiosity. Travellers always attract attention in castles. News travels through people long before letters arrive. Roads carry rumours, plague stories, weather warnings, tales of war, and impossible legends from village to village. Some swear wolves have grown bold along the northern forest this winter. Others claim strange lights move across frozen marshes near abandoned monasteries. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such stories begin with truth or simply with cold, darkness, and too much ale beside roadside fires. The hearth crackles loudly. Outside, wind rattles the shutters. Inside, supper continues beneath smoke-darkened rafters while servants refill cups and scrape old rushes toward the edges of the hall. The warmth slowly loosens the ache from your bones. Your eyelids already feel heavier than before. But the castle night is only beginning. The warmth of the hall settles into you slowly, like thawing fingers after too long in snow. Your shoulders loosen. The ache in your boots softens. Around you the evening meal stretches onward beneath the smoke-black rafters. Neither hurried nor orderly, but moving with the familiar rhythm of people accustomed to surviving long winters together. A servant passes carrying another pitcher of ale, sloshing foam across the rim onto the rush-covered floor. Nobody seems concerned. The rushes have endured worse tonight already. You tear another piece from the coarse loaf beside your trencher. The bread is dense enough that you briefly suspect it could stop an arrow at close range. Still, dipped into hot broth, it becomes surprisingly comforting. Hunger, after all, improves nearly everything. At the centre hearth, logs shift with a burst of sparks that drift upward into the smoky dark above. Shadows ripple along the walls. Somewhere behind you, someone sneezes hard enough to alarm an entire bench of diners. Immediately, an older woman beside him mutters a prayer and taps 2 fingers against a small charm hanging from her neck. Castle folk treat winter illness with a mixture of practical remedies, whispered superstition, herbal cures, prayer, and outright guesswork. Onion poultices, garlic necklaces, rosemary smoke, saintly relics, vinegar tonics, hot ale mixed with honey, and occasionally leeches all compete equally for medical authority. The leeches, unfortunately, remain very confident about their role in matters. Across the table, the battered-faced guard wipes fish oil from his beard and leans closer to the woman telling relic stories. So this saint's finger healed a blind man. That's what they say. And where did this happen? The woman pauses. Near the coast somewhere. conveniently far away. She narrows her eyes. You mock now, but when the winter fever takes your lungs, you'll crawl to every relic between here and Rome. The guard grunts thoughtfully at this because, honestly, she may have a point. Nearby, a servant girl spreads fresh herbs across part of the floor near the fire lavender, mint and sweet woodruff. The crushed scent rises pleasantly beneath the heavier smells of smoke and damp wool. Wealthier castles sometimes scatter entire bundles of herbs among the rushes during feast days, partly for fragrance and partly because people genuinely believe certain plants keep away sickness or bad spirits. Some swear mint protects sleepers from nightmares. Others insist rosemary strengthens memory. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone fully believes these things or simply cannot bear the idea that winter suffering might arrive for no reason at all. You sip from a wooden cup of ale brought moments earlier. It is weak, warm, and slightly sour, which in medieval terms qualifies as perfectly respectable. At the far end of the hall, the musicians surrender their battle against exhaustion and begin packing away instruments. The harpist rubs stiff fingers while another man wraps a small drum in cloth against the damp air. A final song trails softly into the rafters before fading entirely beneath the hall's quieter evening murmur. People begin settling deeper into their benches now. Some continue eating. Others warm themselves silently by the hearth. A few simply stare into the flames with the hollow expression of those who have spent all day outdoors in winter wind. The hall doors open briefly again as two servants drag in another load of firewood dusted with snow. Cold air sweeps across the chamber, stirring candle flames and causing several diners to pull cloaks tighter around themselves. One mutters, "Feels colder every year." An older man nearby answers without hesitation, "That's because you get older every year." A surprisingly advanced medieval observation. Laughter drifts softly through the table. Near the dais, one of the scribes finally pauses his work long enough to flex cramped hands over a candle flame. His face is pale from hours bent above records, wax tablets, parchment rolls, and tiny pots of ink surround him like battlefield debris. You once hear people claim scribes lived gentle lives indoors while peasants froze outside. Those people have clearly never spent 14 straight hours copying grain tallies by candlelight while inhaling smoke thick enough to preserve meat. A servant carrying trenchers stops beside your bench and gathers away the emptiest bowls. Dogs immediately appear beneath the tables hoping for scraps. One large hound noses hopefully against your boots before losing interest and wandering toward more promising targets. You glance toward the high table near the dais where several better-dressed figures remain deep in conversation. Fur collars gleam softly in firelight. Silver cups catch the glow of candles. Their food appears marginally less tragic than everyone else's. Marginally, no one in medieval winter dining truly escapes cabbage. The storm outside grows louder. Wind moans faintly beyond the shuttered windows, threading itself through cracks in the stone walls. Somewhere high above, you hear snow or sleet tapping softly against the roof. A serving woman pauses beside the hearth to warm her hands. Around her wrist hangs a braided red cord threaded with tiny iron rings. You ask quietly whether it is for luck. For spirits, she says simply. You wait. Bad ones dislike iron. This explanation satisfies medieval logic completely. Iron appears everywhere in folk belief. Iron nails above doors, iron charms beneath beds, iron horseshoes beside gates. Some believe wandering spirits cannot cross cold iron. Others claim witches lose their power near it. Still others merely trust sturdy metal more than invisible forces, which, considering castle architecture, seems sensible enough. The serving woman moves on. The battered guard across from you drains his ale and stands with a groan. Night watch soon. he mutters to nobody in particular. One of the merchants laughs. Better you than me. The guard pulls on thick gloves. You'd freeze before midnight. True, the merchant admits immediately. Several nearby men begin discussing weather signs in low voices. Frost rings around the moon, ravens flying west, cracks forming too early in river ice. Medieval people study winter constantly because winter decides everything: food stores, sickness, trade, travel, survival. Some swear this coming snowstorm means wolves will descend from the forest soon. Others insist harsh winters always follow years when monastery bells crack unexpectedly. No one can quite agree whether the bells truly predict disaster, or whether people simply remember the storms afterward and build the story backward from there. The fire beside you burns lower now. Servants replace candles along the tables, trimming blackened wicks carefully with little iron scissors. Beeswax candles belong mostly to chapels and wealthy households. The cheaper tallow ones fill much of the hall with a faint greasy smell as they burn. One candle near the wall sputters violently before going dark altogether. A nearby woman immediately touches the sign of the cross. "Unlucky," she whispers. Another replies, "Only if it happens twice." You're beginning to realize medieval castle life involves a tremendous number of rules no one fully understands, but everyone obeys just in case. The hall gradually softens into quieter evening rhythms. Bowls empty, conversations slow, cloaks dry beside the fire. Beyond the windows, winter deepens over the castle walls. And somewhere beyond the warmth and noise of the hall, colder corridors already wait for you in the dark stone heart of the castle. The great hall slowly empties behind you in waves of tired movement and fading firelight. Servants gather trenchers into stacked piles. Dogs circle hopefully beneath the table searching for forgotten scraps. A final burst of laughter rises near the hearth before dissolving into coughs and weary murmurs. You stand reluctantly from the bench, pulling your cloak tighter once more. The warmth of the hall had almost convinced your bones they were safe. Almost. A narrow-faced servant carrying an iron ring heavy with keys nods for you to follow. The keys clink softly as he walks, each one long and blackened with age, some nearly the size of carving knives. Medieval castles adore keys. Every chest, pantry, chapel door, wine cellar, storage room, armoury, and private chamber seems protected by enough iron hardware to imprison a small kingdom. And judging by the smell drifting from certain corridors, some parts of the castle probably should remain locked. You leave the hall through a side passage beside the kitchens. The warmth fades immediately. Smoke and cooking scents give way to damp stone, cold air, and faint draughts slipping through cracks in the walls. The servant lifts a lantern higher. Its flame trembles inside cloudy horn panels as you descend into the quieter arteries of the castle. The corridor narrows quickly. Rough stone walls rise close on either side, their surfaces slick with winter moisture. Meltwater drips steadily somewhere ahead, rushes thin beneath your feet until only bare flagstones remain, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Your boots echo softly. Far behind you, the sounds of the great hall continue dimly clattering dishes, distant voices, the faint bark of a dog. Ahead lies mostly silence. The servant moves without speaking, though now and then he glances toward shadows along the walls as though expecting something unpleasant to emerge from them. Perhaps rats, perhaps drunk soldiers, perhaps worse. No one can quite agree which creatures truly haunt old castles after dark. Some swear long-dead lords still walk the passages carrying candle stubs. Others claim monks buried beneath chapel floors whisper through the walls during storms. More practical minds insist most hauntings are simply wind, poor sleep, and too much ale. Still, even practical minds tend to walk a little faster in empty corridors at midnight. You pass beneath a low arch where bundles of drying herbs hang from beams overhead: sage, thyme, rosemary, and little knots of garlic. Their scent cuts briefly through the cold dampness. For sickness, you ask quietly. The servant shrugs. For sickness, spirits, rats, depends who you ask. Fair enough. A narrow slit window admits pale moonlight onto the floor. Snowflakes drift beyond the glassless opening before vanishing into darkness below the wall. The wind whistles through with thin, mournful tones that sound almost human. The servant notices you listening. Some say the castle sings before storms. And do you believe that? He considers this seriously. I believe the wind gets everywhere. Honestly, the most sensible person you've met all evening. The corridor bends sharply. Here the walls grow rougher, older somehow, with stones larger and less evenly cut. Torch brackets line the passage at intervals, though only every third torch burns tonight to save supplies. Beeswax is expensive, firewood even more so in harsh winters. You pass several heavy oak doors bound with iron straps. From behind one comes soft snoring, behind another, muffled arguing. A third door bears a chalk symbol scratched beside the frame, a crude circle crossed by two lines. You glance toward it. The servant lowers his voice. Fever room. You walk a little faster after that. Castle illness spreads quickly during winter. Too many people. Too little fresh air, smoke-filled rooms, damp bedding, frozen travel conditions. One coughing servant can quietly become 20 within days. Some swear dry juniper burned near beds prevents sickness. Others place bowls of vinegar beneath sleeping cots to cleanse bad air. A physician might recommend balancing the humours through bleeding. At this point, honestly, you begin rooting for the vinegar. The servant leads you upward along a spiral stair tucked inside the wall itself. The steps are narrow and uneven, worn hollow at the centre by centuries of boots. Your hand slides against cold stone as you climb. Round and round you go. The lantern throws dizzy shadows. Somewhere below, water drips steadily in darkness. Halfway up the stair sits a tiny alcove containing a painted wooden saint no taller than your forearm. Wax drippings surround the figure where travellers and servants have left candle offerings over the years. The saint's face has almost entirely faded away. Still, someone recently placed a sprig of rosemary beside it. Those who live in castles rarely trust stone walls alone. Protection comes from prayers, relics, charms, iron nails, saints, herbs, habits, routines, whispered blessings before sleep, and traditions so old nobody remembers their origin anymore. You finally emerge from the stair into another passage lined with storage chests and hanging tapestries. The tapestries sway slightly in hidden draughts, their woven hunting scenes faded by smoke and age. Noblemen on horseback chase impossible deer forever across darkened cloth while hounds leap through stitched forests. One tapestry near the end has partially rotted away at the bottom corner. A rat darts beneath it. The servant pretends not to notice. You continue onward. The air here feels colder than before despite being higher within the castle. Wind creeps beneath doors and slips through shutter cracks. Somewhere distant, a bell tolls softly from beyond the walls. One, then silence again. Monastery bells mark time across much of medieval life. Even deep within castles, people listen for them unconsciously dawn prayers, evening prayers, funerals, feast days, warnings, storms. Sometimes bells crack during severe winters from the cold alone. Some swear that foretells death nearby. Others insist it merely foretells expensive repairs. At the far end of the passage stands another servant piling wool blankets onto a bench. She nods politely as you pass, though her expression suggests she's been awake since before sunrise and no longer remembers what happiness feels like. Understandable. Winter castle labour never truly stops. You pass a final corner where narrow windows overlook the black valley below. River mist drifts pale beneath the moon. Tiny watchfires flicker outside distant walls. Snow moves sideways across the night sky. For a moment, the castle feels impossibly vast. Not merely a building, but an entire breathing world of kitchens, chapels, stables, storerooms, sleeping chambers, hidden stairs, old fears, ancient routines, and cold stone endlessly holding winter within itself. The servant finally stops beside a thick oak door reinforced with iron bands. He lifts the lantern. Your chamber. The word chamber sounds generous. Still, after the frozen roads and bitter wind outside, even a draughty corner beneath the rafters may soon feel like paradise. The servant reaches for the key. The lock clicks heavily in the silence. The oak door opens with a long creak that echoes softly down the corridor behind you. A breath of colder air slips outward from the chamber beyond, carrying the smell of old straw, damp wool, extinguished candle smoke, and stone that has not felt true warmth in centuries. The servant raises the lantern and steps aside. Your chamber, as promised. Though chamber remains a wonderfully optimistic medieval term for what is essentially a box made of freezing rock. Still, after the road outside, it will do. You duck beneath the low doorway and step inside carefully. The room is narrow and uneven, built into one corner of the castle wall. Thick beams cross the ceiling overhead, blackened by age and smoke. A single slit window peers out toward the dark valley below, its wooden shutters rattling faintly in the wind. Beside the wall stands a bed frame stuffed with straw bedding and layered wool blankets. Nearby rests a three-legged stool, a wash basin with thin ice forming along its rim, and a tiny iron brazier containing only faintly glowing coals. The servant sets the lantern down. More warmth downstairs than up here, he mutters apologetically. An understatement worthy of sainthood. You thank him anyway. He nods once, then removes a small beeswax candle from his belt pouch and places it beside the bed. Better than tallow, he says quietly, less smoke. That alone makes him perhaps the finest host in medieval Europe. Before leaving, he reaches above the doorway and touches a tiny iron nail hammered into the lintel. For luck, he explains. Then he disappears back into the corridor, lantern glow fading slowly away until only silence and your single candle remain. You stand still for a moment listening. The castle sounds different up here. Lower, older somehow. The wind murmurs through unseen cracks in the walls. Timber creaks softly overhead, somewhere distant below. Faint footsteps echo along stone passages. Farther still comes the muffled roar of the great hall, continuing beneath layers of floor and stone. And underneath all of it, you hear the constant sighing breath of winter pressing against the castle walls. You move toward the brazier first, crouching beside it carefully. A few weak coals pulse red beneath grey ash. You stir them gently with an iron poker left nearby. Tiny sparks flutter upward. Not much heat, but enough to convince your fingers they may survive the night. You remove your gloves and cloak slowly, hanging them near the brazier in hopeful optimism. Dampness rises immediately from the wool. Your boots leave muddy prints across the rush-covered floor where someone has scattered dried lavender among the straw. A pleasant touch. Or perhaps an attempt to disguise older smells lurking beneath the rushes. Medieval floors contain mysteries best left unexplored. You sit carefully on the edge of the bed. The straw mattress rustles loudly beneath you. One corner sags noticeably lower than the rest. Wool blankets lie folded at the foot, thick but rough against the skin. A fur covering rabbit, perhaps, or badly shaved sheep rests across the topmost layer. You test the bedding with one hand. Cold. Spectacularly cold. It feels less like climbing into bed and more like negotiating a peace treaty with winter itself. Still, exhaustion presses heavily behind your eyes now. The long road, the cold yard, the smoky hall, the winding passages, all of it settles into your bones with slow medieval determination. You light the beeswax candle. Its steady golden flame softens the room immediately. Shadows pull back from the walls. The air fills with the faint sweet scent of honeyed wax instead of greasy tallow smoke. Wealthier households prize beeswax candles greatly. Monasteries especially treasure them for chapels and sacred spaces. Some believe purer candles keep away bad dreams or restless spirits. Others simply appreciate being able to breathe indoors. You move toward the narrow window. The shutters groan as you ease them open slightly. Outside, the night stretches vast and silver beneath drifting snow. The valley below disappears beneath mist. Watchfires burn along the outer walls like tiny stars trapped close to earth. Beyond them lies only darkness and forest. A bell rings somewhere distant. One slow note, then another. Perhaps a monastery beyond the hills marking late prayers. Perhaps the castle chapel calling the faithful. Medieval nights rarely fall fully silent. Somewhere, always, bells continue speaking through darkness. Some swear bells confuse wandering spirits during storms. Others insist the dead simply dislike the sound. No one can quite agree whether either explanation matters, but people ring them faithfully anyway. A sudden gust forces icy air through the shutter gap. You close it quickly and return toward the bed, rubbing warmth back into stiff hands. Beside the stool rests a clay jug covered with cloth. Alette. Thin, sour, and probably safer than water. You pour a little into a wooden cup and drink carefully. The liquid tastes faintly of yeast and smoke. Warmth spreads slowly through your chest afterward. On the wall above the bed hangs a tiny wooden carving of St. Christopher carrying a traveller across water. Travellers often pray to him for safe journeys. Sailors, pilgrims, merchants, wandering monks all trust his image enough to carry little charms or tokens bearing his likeness. Some swear no traveller dies beneath St. Christopher's protection, though medieval roads continue offering strong counter-arguments. The candle flickers softly. Outside, snow taps gently against the shutters now. You pull one blanket around your shoulders and sit quietly listening to the castle breathe around you. Somewhere nearby, pipes groan faintly. A servant coughs behind a distant wall. Far below, laughter briefly rises from the hall before fading again into muffled silence. The room feels lonely, but not empty. Castles never truly feel empty. Too many generations pass through them, too many footsteps, too many whispered prayers, arguments, deaths, celebrations, secrets. Stone remembers in its own way. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the feeling comes from imagination or simply from sleeping inside walls older than entire kingdoms. Your candle burns steadily lower. You finally kneel beside the bed to remove your boots. The leather has stiffened from cold and dampness. One sock contains more holes than fabric at this point, which feels deeply authentic to the medieval experience. You slide beneath the blankets carefully. The cold hits immediately. Every inch of bedding seems determined to preserve winter forever. Straw crackles beneath your weight. The fur covering smells faintly of smoke and animal musk. You curl deeper beneath the wool, drawing the blankets tight around your shoulders while your breath rises pale in the candlelight. Slowly, painfully slowly, warmth begins gathering around you. Outside the chamber, footsteps pass once along the corridor. Then silence again. The candle flame bends gently in hidden draughts. And somewhere below, deep within the sleeping castle, another bell begins to toll through the winter night. The bell continues tolling through the castle long after you settle beneath the blankets, each slow note drifting upward through stone floors and timber beams like ripples spreading across dark water. You count them without meaning to. 4. Then silence. The sound lingers anyway. Medieval nights organize themselves around bells. People wake, pray, work, eat, sleep, bury their dead, and fear storms according to bells. Even travellers lost in forest listen for distant abbey towers through mist and rain. Somewhere beyond these walls, monks in cold chapels are probably already gathering for late prayers while half asleep beneath wool robes. A strangely comforting thought. You shift slightly beneath the blankets. The bed creaks in protest. The warmth you created inside the wool cocoon is finally beginning to win its long battle against the cold trapped in the mattress. Your feet remain freezing. However, medieval beds excel at preserving icy toes with almost sacred dedication. The candle beside you burns lower now, its flame wavering whenever draughts creep through cracks in the shutters. Shadows move softly along the walls. The carved St. Christopher above the bed seems almost alive in flickering light, his painted eyes dark with age and smoke. Outside, snow continues falling. You can hear it now against the shutters, soft little taps and whispers carried by the wind. For a while the castle quiets. Then, faintly, you hear movement again somewhere beyond your chamber. A door opening. Low voices. Bootsteps along the corridor. The castle never truly sleeps all at once. Guards change watch. Servants carry ashes from hearths. Stable hands tend restless horses. Kitchen workers prepare bread dough long before dawn. Somewhere, someone always remains awake staring into firelight while winter presses against the walls outside. You pull the blanket closer beneath your chin. The wool scratches slightly against your face but traps precious warmth. Beneath the stronger smells of smoke and straw lingers faint lavender from the rushes scattered earlier across the floor. A clever trick. Many households spread herbs near sleeping places not only for fragrance, but because some believe pleasant scents protect the mind during sleep. Lavender for calm, rosemary for memory, mugwort for dreams. Though given the state of medieval bedding, honestly, any surviving pleasant smell deserves admiration. The wind rises sharply outside. A low moaning sound moves through the stonework. Somewhere farther down the corridor, a shutter bangs once, twice, then stills again. You remember the servant's words earlier. The castle sings before storms. Lying here now, listening to air move through hidden cracks and narrow passages, you almost understand what he meant. The entire fortress breathes. Timbers creak softly overhead. Ash settles in distant hearths. Wind slips through arrow slits and under doors. Water drips somewhere deep below inside unseen cisterns or forgotten tunnels. Some swear old castles are alive in their own way. Others say people trapped too long indoors during winter begin imagining personalities for walls simply to stay sane. Both explanations feel possible tonight. Your eyes grow heavier. Then suddenly, scratch! You freeze. Another scratch follows from somewhere near the corner of the room. Tiny claws against wood. A rat emerges briefly from beneath the stool, pauses to inspect your boots, then disappears again into darkness behind the wall. You exhale slowly. Only a rat, which in medieval terms is almost reassuring. Castles contain endless rats, fat kitchen rats, stable rats, chapel rats bold enough to steal crumbs beside praying monks. Entire dynasties of rats likely rule the lower cellars by now beneath the notice of human civilization. Some castle folk hang herbs or keep terriers to control them. Others insist rats flee from saint relics. The rats themselves appear unconvinced. You listen another moment. Silence returns. The candle burns lower still, wax pooling along its base. The little room softens around the edges as exhaustion deepens behind your eyes. Then somewhere outside comes the howl. Distant. Long. You lift your head slightly. Again the sound rises across the valley below the castle walls. Wolf perhaps, or when moving strangely through the hills. No one can quite agree whether wolves truly come this close to the castle during hard winters. Some guards swear they see eyes beyond the watchfires. Others claim frightened travellers mistake dogs or foxes for wolves after dark. Still, the howl carries something ancient within it. The dog from the courtyard begins barking far below in response. Another joins in. Then silence swallows everything again. You settle back slowly into the blankets. A faint orange glow flickers beneath your door as someone carrying a lantern passes through the corridor outside. Footsteps pause nearby. For one strange moment, you think the figure may stop at your chamber. Instead, the steps continue onward and fade into the distance. Those who tell the tale never fully agree who walks castle corridors deepest into the night. Guards, servants, restless nobles, monks unable to sleep, or perhaps simply old buildings remembering the people who once moved through them centuries earlier. You're too tired to decide. The brazier beside the wall gives one final soft crackle as its last coals dim lower beneath ash. Cold begins creeping slowly back into the room. You curl tighter beneath the blankets, drawing your knees upward for warmth. The straw mattress rustles softly beneath you. Above, snowstorm winds drag across the tower roofs and battlements. Somewhere below, a heavy door slams. Then faintly, laughter. Quick, distant, probably drunken. The sound fades almost immediately. You imagine the guards at the gatehouse huddled near their brazier throwing dice while snow gathers along the walls outside. One probably complains about frozen boots. Another claims to hear spirits in the storm. A third insists all strange noises are merely bad beer and worse weather. Honestly, he may be correct. Your breathing slows. The candle flame gutters once. Twice. You watch it struggle against the draught, bending sideways in the dark room. Then finally it steadies again. For now. You stare toward the ceiling beams where smoke stains vanish into shadow. The sounds of the castle continue dimly around you. Distant footsteps, murmuring wind, creaking wood, faint bells somewhere far beyond the valley. A sleeping world wrapped in winter stone. And gradually, despite the cold, despite the strange noises, despite the uneasy sense that old castles never fully rest, your body begins surrendering at last to exhaustion. The blankets grow warmer. The storm grows softer. The darkness gentler. And somewhere beyond waking thought, the castle night carries you slowly towards sleep. Sometime later, though you could not possibly say how long, a hard burst of sound drags you halfway awake again. Rain. Heavy now. It lashes against the shutters with sudden force while wind rattles the walls like a traveller desperate to be let inside. The storm has shifted. Snow has become freezing rain, and the entire castle groans softly beneath it. For a few moments you remain wrapped motionless beneath the blankets, caught in that strange medieval hour where the night feels endless and the bed feels simultaneously too cold and too difficult to leave. Then comes another sound. Voices outside your chamber door. Low, rushed. A lantern glow slips briefly beneath the threshold. You hear someone mutter about the gatehouse. Another answers with something about the storm driving water beneath the outer doors. Then footsteps retreat quickly down the corridor again. The castle, or it seems, has decided sleep is optional tonight. You sigh quietly into the blankets. The brazier beside the wall is nearly dead now, little more than grey ash and faint red glow. Cold has returned fully to the chamber. Your breath fogs faintly in the dark. The beeswax candle finally surrendered some time earlier, leaving only the dim silver of a stormlight filtering through the shutter cracks. Outside, thunder rolls distantly across the valley. Not loud, just deep enough to vibrate faintly through the stones. You sit up slowly. The blankets resist your departure with admirable determination. Still, curiosity wins. You pull your cloak around your shoulders, jam your feet back into stiff boots, and ease open the chamber door. The corridor beyond lies mostly dark except for scattered lanterns burning low in wall brackets. Drafts move steadily through the passage carrying smells of damp wool, wet stone, and extinguished torches. Rain taps faintly somewhere deeper inside the castle. You follow the corridor carefully. Your footsteps echo softly over the worn stones while the storm murmurs all around the walls outside. Several doors remain shut tight. From behind one comes heavy snoring, behind another, quiet coughing. A servant hurries past carrying folded cloths and barely notices you. Farther ahead, voices drift upward from a stairwell. You descend slowly toward them. The spiral stairs are colder now than before, slick with moisture blown inward from unseen cracks. Lantern shadows twist along the curved walls as you move downward through the tower. At the bottom, another corridor opens toward the outer gatehouse. The air here smells strongly of wet leather and rain-soaked wood. You round the final corner and find the guards gathered near the inner gate passage, huddled around a brazier glowing orange beneath the storm-dark archway. Rainwater drips steadily from the ceiling stones. One guard looks up as you approach but seems too tired to object. "Couldn't sleep either," he asks. You shake your head. No one sleeps properly during storms, another mutters while warming his hands above the coals. The gatehouse feels entirely different at night than it did earlier. Quieter. Smaller somehow. The great outer doors remain barred shut with massive timber beams slick from dampness. Water runs beneath the threshold in tiny streams. Beyond the narrow arrow slits, rain lashes sideways across the darkness outside. The scruffy brown dog from earlier lies curled beside the brazier, sleeping despite the noise with the confidence of a creature long accustomed to miserable weather. A wise animal. One guard tosses another pair of dice onto an overturned crate serving as a table. The dice clatter softly while thunder mutters again beyond the walls. "Storm came fast," says the older guard with the frost-grey beard you noticed earlier. "River's rising already," another answers. This earns several uneasy looks. Winter rain worries castle folk almost more than snow. Frozen ground cannot absorb water properly. Roads vanish into mud. Bridges collapse. Rivers flood low villages. Supply wagons become trapped for days. Some swear storms arriving after midnight are signs of restless spirits crossing the land. Others claim storms simply follow bad weather. The practical explanation feels more convincing tonight. One guard notices you staring toward the darkness outside. "Hard to see the valley from here," he says, "but you can hear it." And he is right. Beneath the rain comes the distant sound of rushing water far below the cliffs. Louder now than before, the river moving through darkness unseen. The gatehouse lanterns flicker violently as wind forces itself through cracks around the doors. One of the younger guards immediately mutters a prayer beneath his breath and touches an iron charm tied around his wrist. Storms make medieval people deeply superstitious. To be fair, storms also regularly kill them. A little caution seems reasonable. The older guard pokes at the brazier with an iron rod. Sparks leap upward briefly. "Castle took lightning once," he says suddenly. Several men glance toward him. "When?" "Before my time. Hit the western tower." He nods toward the darkness overhead. Cook swore blue fire ran along the walls afterward. Cook also swears he saw a fish recite scripture. Fish might have had more sense than the priest. Soft laughter moves through the gatehouse. Even exhausted medieval guards maintain surprising dedication to deeply questionable humour. Rain continues hammering the outer walls. You settle onto an empty crate near the brazier, extending chilled hands toward the heat. The dog lifts its head briefly this time, recognizes you, then decides you still possess no food worth investigating. Harsh but fair judgment. Somewhere overhead, chains creak softly where the portcullis mechanism rests above the gate tunnel. Water drips steadily from beams blackened by centuries of smoke and dampness. One guard quietly sharpens a knife beside the wall. Another stares half asleep into the brazier flames. The storm slowly wraps the castle in a cocoon of sound rain against stone. Rattling shutters, distant thunder, rising river water, murmuring wind through battlements. And beneath it all comes something stranger. A long hollow cry carried briefly across the valley. The guards fall silent immediately. You listen carefully. Again the sound drifts through the rain. Not wolf this time. Not exactly. One younger guard shifts uneasily. Hear that? The older man shrugs without looking up. Wind through the old abbey ruins. You sure? No. An honest answer. No one can quite agree what noises travel through valleys during storms. Some swear abandoned monasteries sing in bad weather. Others claim drowned travellers called from flooded rivers. Most likely the sound is merely air moving across broken stone somewhere beyond sight. Still, nobody speaks for several moments afterward. The dog presses closer to the brazier. Outside, rain continues falling over the sleeping castle, while the guards wait through another long winter night beneath the ancient walls. And slowly, sitting beside the coals with warmth creeping back into your hands, your eyelids begin growing heavy once more. The brazier burns lower as the night deepens around the gatehouse. One by one, the guards drift into quieter moods, their earlier conversation fading into long silences broken only by rain and the occasional clatter of dice against wood. You sit wrapped in your cloak, half warmed by the coals and half chilled by the damp air creeping through the stone passage. The scruffy dog beside the brazier sighs dramatically in its sleep. Honestly, the most relatable creature in the castle. After a while, the older grey-bearded guard stretches stiffly and rises from his crate. "Storm's easing," he mutters. "River'll still be angry by dawn, though." Another guard grunts without enthusiasm. The rain outside has softened somewhat now, becoming a steadier whisper against the walls rather than the furious pounding from earlier. Wind still threads through cracks in the gatehouse, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant pine forests. You realize suddenly how tired you are. Not merely sleepy, but deeply worn down in the old medieval way. Cold bones, smoke-heavy lungs, damp clothing, too many stone stairs, too little proper rest. The castle itself seems tired too, settling into slow midnight breathing around you. One of the younger guards notices you rubbing your hands. "If you want warmer shelter," he says, "the monk's room still has a fire." The others exchange quick glances. The monk asks another guard skeptically. He's awake anyway. When is he not? A brief silence follows. Then the older guard shrugs toward you. Room near the chapel stairs. Brother Aldrich. The way they say his name suggests affection mixed cautiously with concern. Promising. You thank them and rise reluctantly from the warmth of the brazier. The dog opens one eye as though considering whether to follow you, then wisely decides the fire remains the superior option. Traitorous, but understandable. The corridor leading away from the gatehouse feels colder now after sitting near the coals. Your lanternless path glows only faintly from scattered wall torches and occasional candle niches tucked into the stone. Rainwater drips steadily from your cloak hem as you climb another narrow stair. The castle has quieted further during the storm's passing. Voices have mostly disappeared. Only distant footsteps echo now and then through hidden passages. You pass the little faded St. alcove again halfway up the spiral stair. Someone has placed another candle there since earlier. Fresh wax glistens softly beneath the tiny wooden figure. Medieval people leave candles everywhere during storms. Part prayer, part habit, part refusal to believe darkness should ever go entirely unanswered. At the top of the stairs, the corridor bends toward the chapel wing. The air changes subtly here. Less smoke, more wax and incense. Even old stone seems calmer somehow near places of worship. A narrow lamp burns outside one half-open doorway. Warm orange light spills softly across the floor. You approach quietly. Inside, a small chamber glows with firelight and candles. Shelves line the walls packed with books, folded parchment, clay jars, bunches of dried herbs, and tiny bundles tied with string. A low hearth crackles steadily near the far side of the room, and seated beside it is the monk. Brother Aldrich looks older than the castle itself. His grey robe hangs loosely from narrow shoulders. Ink stains darken his sleeves and fingertips. Wisps of white hair escape beneath his hood, while small round spectacles rest crookedly upon his nose. He glances up from a manuscript without surprise. "Couldn't sleep?" he asks. Apparently this castle has formed an entire midnight society of exhausted people, wandering corridors during storms. You step inside gratefully. The warmth here feels gentler than the great hall fire, smaller, softer, the kind of warmth carefully protected rather than loudly celebrated. Brother Aldrich gestures toward a stool near the hearth. You sit. The monk dips his pen again into ink with slow, deliberate care. Beside him rests a candle shielded by polished horn panels to protect the flame from drafts. Several books lie open nearby, their pages crowded with tiny, neat writing. You glance toward the shelves. Herbs hang drying from beams overhead: chamomile, sage, mint, thyme, and stranger plants you cannot identify. For remedies, you ask. For remedies, the monk says. A pause. And for mice. Reasonable priorities. He continues writing for several moments while rain whispers faintly against the chapel windows beyond the wall. Finally he speaks again. Storms wake people. Do they wake you? I'm old. Everything wakes me. Another surprisingly advanced medieval observation. Brother Aldrich closes the manuscript gently and removes his spectacles. His eyes look tired but sharp beneath heavy brows. You came through the North Road. You nod. Mud. Yes, always mud. He seems deeply unsurprised by this. The monk rises slowly and crosses toward a simmering pot hanging above the hearth. He pours steaming liquid into a clay cup and hands it to you carefully. The drink smells of mint and something bitter underneath. Herbal tonic, he says. You hesitate briefly. He notices. If it comforts you, I have not killed anyone with it this month. Not especially comforting. Still, The warmth alone feels worth the risk. You sip carefully. Mint floods your mouth first, followed by honey and an aggressively medicinal bitterness that lingers afterward like a personal insult. Brother Aldrich watches calmly. Good for sleep, he says. Does it taste this terrible on purpose? Probably. Fair enough. The monk settles back beside the hearth while firelight flickers across shelves of books and jars around him. Outside, the storm continues fading gradually into softer rain. Somewhere nearby, chapel bells ring faintly once. Brother Aldrich crosses himself automatically at the sound. Late prayers, you ask? For the sick, mostly. He pokes at the fire thoughtfully. Winter fevers spreading through villages again. You remember the fever-marked door upstairs. The monk notices your expression. Cold seasons always bring fear, he says quietly. People pray harder in winter. And does it help? Brother Aldrich considers this for a long moment. Sometimes prayer changes people more than circumstances. A very monk-like answer, though somehow comforting anyway. On the shelf behind him rests a tiny silver reliquary shaped like a hand. Candlelight gleams softly across it. You nod toward it. A relic. Supposedly. The monk smiles faintly. Supposedly. No one can quite agree whose finger bone it contains anymore. And people still pray to it. Oh yes, he shrugs gently. People rarely require certainty before hoping. The fire crackles softly between you. Rain fades further outside. The little room grows warmer, quieter, sleepier. And slowly, while Brother Aldrich returns to his writing beneath candlelight and drifting herb scents, your heavy eyelids begin surrendering once more to the long medieval night. Brother Aldrich's chamber grows quieter with every passing moment, until the only sounds left are the scratching of his quill, the soft settling of the hearth fire, and the distant murmur of rain retreating across the castle roofs. The warmth pulls gently at your exhaustion. You sit slumped slightly on the stool, cloak wrapped around your shoulders, clay cup resting empty between your hands. Whatever herbs the monk brewed into the drink have begun softening the edges of the night around you. Your thoughts drift more slowly now, like river mist moving through low fields before dawn. The monk glances up from his writing. You should sleep while the castle allows it. Does it usually not? Brother Aldrich snorts quietly. Castles are full of men, animals, wind, bells, and poor decisions. Silence rarely survives long. A remarkably accurate summary of medieval life. You rise reluctantly from the hearth's comfort. The monk stands as well, slower than before, and takes up a small lantern hanging beside the shelves. I'll show you a shorter stair, he says. Together you leave the chamber and step back into the dim corridor outside. The rain has nearly stopped now. Only occasional drops tap softly from the ceiling stones where dampness gathers. The lantern light sways gently as the monk leads you deeper into the upper passages of the castle. These corridors feel older than the others somehow. Narrower, more uneven. The walls lean slightly in places where centuries have shifted the stone. Faded religious paintings linger beneath soot and moisture, saints with solemn faces, angels carrying scrolls, fragments of gold leaf still catching lantern glow. You pass a tiny chapel alcove no larger than a closet. A single beeswax candle burns before a painted Virgin and Child darkened almost black by smoke. Fresh rosemary lies at the base of the image. Who keeps replacing the herbs, you ask quietly. Brother Aldrich smiles faintly. Everyone. That feels strangely appropriate. The monk pauses near a window slit overlooking the inner courtyard below. Together you look outward into the sleeping castle. Rainwater glistens across the stones. Torch flames burn low near the gatehouse. Snow remains piled along roof edges and battlements despite the storm's warmer rain. The yard that seemed so crowded earlier now lies almost empty, except for one stable hand crossing hurriedly with a lantern. Beyond the walls, a fog blankets the valley entirely. The world outside the castle has vanished. Beautiful at night, the monk murmurs. You nod. Though beautiful in the medieval sense usually means cold enough to threaten your survival at any moment. Still, there is something peaceful about it now. The castle no longer feels harsh or crowded. Instead, it seems wrapped gently in darkness and rain, its endless noises softened by the late hour. Far below, a horse stamps inside the stable. Then silence returns. Brother Aldrich continues onward through another low archway. The stair beyond climbs steeply upward within the wall itself. The steps are cramped and uneven, forcing you to duck beneath heavy beams overhead. What's above us, you ask? Upper chambers, old storage rooms, or a part of the western tower. And below, the monk lifts the lantern slightly. More stairs. Entirely believable. Medieval castles appear designed by people deeply suspicious of flat surfaces. At the top of the stair, cold air greets you immediately. Stronger now. Sharper. You emerge into a long upper gallery running beneath the roof beams. Here the castle feels almost abandoned. Tattered tapestries hang motionless in the dimness. Frost gathers faintly along the inner edges of shuttered windows. Wind whistles somewhere overhead through unseen cracks. Brother Aldrich pauses beside a chest bound in iron. Winter blankets, he explains, for guests who arrive nearly frozen. He eyes your cloak politely. You qualify. The monk opens the chest and removes another wool blanket, thick and rough but wonderfully heavy. He hands it to you. Take it. You thank him sincerely. Return it before spring, he says. A dangerous level of optimism considering medieval survival rates. You continue together along the gallery. Somewhere beyond the walls comes the faint cry of an owl drifting across the valley. The sound echoes strangely through the mist. Brother Aldrich pauses briefly. Some villagers dislike hearing owls near winter. Why? Too many old stories? No one can quite agree whether owls bring wisdom, death, storms, or merely annoyance to people trying to sleep. Medieval superstition attaches itself enthusiastically to nearly every animal unfortunate enough to make noise after sunset. The gallery bends gently toward your chamber wing. Here the castle settles into deeper silence once more. Even the wind seems quieter. Your boots whisper softly across old rushes while lantern light ripples along the walls. Then suddenly, footsteps ahead. Both you and the monk stop. A figure emerges dimly from the farther end of the passage carrying a single candle lantern. A woman wrapped in dark wool moves carefully through the corridor, eyes lowered. She nods respectfully to Brother Aldrich as she passes. The healer, the monk whispers after she disappears down another stair. Visiting the fever rooms. He nods. Neither of you speaks for several moments afterward. Winter sickness lingers like a shadow beneath every castle conversation. Even warm halls and thick walls cannot fully protect against it. Brother Aldrich finally sighs softly. People sleep easier, pretending illness only happens elsewhere. A fair observation for almost any century. At last you reach your chamber door again. The monk lifts the lantern one final time. Its glow catches drifting dust and faint smoke lingering beneath the beams overhead. You'll hear strange sounds before dawn, he says calmly. Storms settling in the walls. Mostly a pause and mice. You appreciate the honesty. Before leaving, Brother Aldrich removes something small from his sleeve pouch and presses it into your hand. A tiny carved wooden token no larger than a coin. Saint Christopher again. For travellers, he says simply, you thank him once more. The monk inclines his head and turns away, lantern glow retreating slowly down the corridor until darkness folds gently around him and he vanishes completely. You step back inside your chamber. The room remains bitterly cold, but somehow less unfriendly than before. Perhaps it is the extra blanket, perhaps the lingering warmth from the monk's hearth, perhaps simply exhaustion finally overcoming discomfort. You close the door softly behind you. Outside, the castle settles deeper into the final hours before dawn, and at last, wrapped in wool beneath creaking beams and fading storm winds, you prepare once more to surrender yourself to sleep. You close the chamber door carefully behind you, and for a moment the silence feels almost complete. Almost, because castles are never truly silent. The wind still murmurs faintly through the shutters. Somewhere distant below, a door closes with a muffled thud. Water drips steadily inside hidden walls. Old beams creak overhead like tired ships at sea. The entire fortress settles around you with the slow, restless movements of something ancient trying to sleep comfortably and failing. You set the extra blanket onto the bed gratefully. Brother Aldrich may genuinely be the closest thing this castle possesses to a miracle. The room remains cold enough that your breath still clouds faintly before you. Yet after the warm herb drink and the monk's firelit chamber, the darkness here no longer feels lonely, only tired. Very tired. You kneel beside the brazier and stir its ashes once more. Deep below the grey powder, a few stubborn red embers still survive. You add a scrap of kindling from the basket nearby and blow carefully. Tiny flames awaken reluctantly. There now exists approximately enough heat to warm half of one hand. Progress. You remove your damp cloak and boots again, setting them closer to the brazier. Rainwater darkens the rushes beneath them. The lavender scent has mostly faded now, replaced again by wool, smoke, old wood, and stone chilled through by winter rain. The beeswax candle is gone entirely, but moonlight seeps faintly through the shutter cracks where the storm clouds have begun breaking apart. Pale silver bands stretch across the floor and the foot of the bed. Outside, the rain has nearly stopped. You crawl beneath the blankets once more, this time adding Brother Aldrich's heavy wool covering over the others. Immediate improvement. The bed still resembles a pile of frozen straw abandoned inside a wall, but now at least it resembles an expensive pile of frozen straw abandoned inside a wall. You settle deeper into the bedding. Slowly the warmth gathers again around your body. Your eyes close. Then, clang. Somewhere far below, metal strikes metal. You open your eyes with a sigh. A moment later comes another sound, distant footsteps running briefly along a corridor, followed by muffled voices. The castle remains awake. You lie still listening. A horse whinnies from the stable yard. Chains creak faintly near the gatehouse. Somewhere in the walls, mice resume tiny secret journeys through hidden spaces between stones and beams. One scratches briefly near the corner before vanishing again. Then, drifting softly upward through the sleeping castle comes the sound of chanting. Low, slow, almost swallowed by distance. You recognize monastery prayers immediately. The chapel below must still hold late-night devotions for the sick. Brother Aldrich was right, Winter. Fear keeps many people awake. The voices rise and fall gently beneath the stones. Latin words blur together beyond recognition, becoming less language than rhythm. A strange comfort settles over the castle as the chanting continues. Even those not especially religious often sleep easier hearing prayers somewhere nearby. It feels reassuring knowing someone remains awake keeping watch against darkness, sickness, storms, and whatever else medieval knights decide to invent. Some swear evil spirits avoid places where prayers continue after midnight. Others suspect the spirits simply prefer warmer accommodations. The chanting fades gradually. You pull the blanket closer beneath your chin and stare toward the shuttered window. Moonlight brightens now that the clouds have thinned. Thin silver beams illuminate drifting dust near the ceiling. The carved St. Christopher watches quietly above the bed. Your eyelids begin lowering again. Then comes another sound. Not loud. Just soft footsteps passing slowly outside your chamber. You remain still. The steps pause briefly near your door. Silence. Then continue onward down the corridor. Perhaps a servant. Perhaps the healer returning from the fever rooms. Perhaps someone unable to sleep wandering the castle as you wandered earlier. Or perhaps old stones merely remembering footsteps long after the people themselves are gone. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The brazier crackles faintly. Wind brushes gently against the shutters. And gradually at last the castle begins sinking deeper into true night silence. No more laughter rises from the hall. No more dice clatter in the gatehouse. Even the stable-yard quiets. Only the occasional bell far away marks the passing hours now. You drift slowly towards sleep once more. Dreamlike thoughts begin mingling with the sounds around you. The smoky hall, the muddy courtyard, Brother Aldrich's ink-stained fingers, the dog beside the brazier, snow beyond the battlements, bells through fog. Everything softens. Your breathing slows. Then suddenly a long low howl drifts across the valley again. Fainter this time. Farther away. Yet unmistakable. You open your eyes halfway but remain motionless beneath the blankets. Another howl answers somewhere even farther beyond the forests. Then silence. The castle does not react this time. No barking dogs. No startled voices. Perhaps everyone else sleeps too deeply now to hear it. Or perhaps wolves are simply ordinary enough winter companions that nobody bothers worrying anymore. Medieval life leaves little energy for unnecessary panic. You listen another moment. Nothing follows. Outside the shutters, clouds continue clearing slowly from the moon. Rainwater drips from rooftops into the yard below, somewhere far beyond sight. The river keeps moving through darkness beneath the castle cliffs. The sounds blend together gently now distant water, faint wind, settling wood, quiet breathing. A sleeping world. You turn slightly beneath the blankets until the warmth fully surrounds you at last. The extra wool presses heavily and comfortably across your shoulders. The straw mattress no longer feels hostile so much as resigned to your existence. A meaningful improvement in your relationship. Your thoughts drift further. The monastery chants become memory. The storm becomes memory. Even the cold begins fading at the edges. Only the slow-breathing castle remains around you now, ancient and watchful beneath moonlit winter skies. And this time, finally, exhaustion pulls you fully downward into sleep before another sound can wake you again. At some unknowable hour before dawn, you wake again, not suddenly this time, but slowly, gently, as though the castle itself is nudging you back toward consciousness. The chamber's darker now. The moon has vanished behind clouds again, leaving only the faintest grey outline around the shutter cracks. Your blankets have become wonderfully warm at last, trapping heat so completely that leaving them now feels both foolish and morally wrong. Then a bell rings. One deep note. Another follows several breaths later. Morning watch, or something close to it. In medieval castles, time before dawn belongs to bakers, monks, guards, servants, and deeply unfortunate travellers. Everyone else remains sensibly unconscious. You lie still listening as the castle gradually begins stirring around you once more. Far below comes the dull scrape of benches across stone, A distant door opens. Someone coughs loudly in the corridor. Then footsteps begin moving through the walls again, slow, heavy, exhausted footsteps belonging to people who've risen long before sunrise every day of their lives. The cold has crept back into the chamber during the night. Your nose feels freezing while the rest of you remains hidden safely beneath wool and fur. Medieval sleeping arrangements excel at creating highly specific pockets of misery. Still, curiosity wins again. You sit up slowly, immediately regretting every life choice that separates you from the blankets. Cold air rushes against your face and hands. The brazier beside the wall has died completely now. Nothing left but pale ash. Outside the shutters, the wind has calmed. You rise stiffly from bed and pull your cloak over your shoulders before opening the shutters a crack. The world beyond the castle walls has transformed. A pale frost covers everything. The storm clouds have broken apart entirely, leaving the valley silver blue beneath the fading night sky. Thin river mist curls through the forests below like drifting smoke. Snow clings to rooftops, battlements, and towers, while every torch in the courtyard glows softly through the cold dawn haze. The castle looks strangely peaceful now, as though all the noise and worry from earlier belonged to another world entirely. Far below, guards move along the battlements carrying lanterns dim against the coming morning. One pauses near the western tower to stamp warmth back into his feet. Another leans against the wall, staring out toward the forests. You understand him. Something about winter dawns demands quiet observation. You close the shutters reluctantly and begin dressing again. Your boots are still damp, which feels like an especially personal betrayal. Pulling them on requires determination usually associated with military campaigns. At least the extra blanket remains wonderfully warm around your shoulders. You fold it carefully. Brother Aldrich trusted you with valuable wool during winter. That is practically the medieval equivalent of giving someone a treasure chest. Outside your chamber, the corridor feels colder than before but far more alive. Servants already move through the passages carrying bundles of wood, baskets of bread, buckets of water, and armfuls of rushes. A sleepy kitchen boy nearly collides with you while hauling firewood twice his size. "Sorry," he mutters automatically without slowing. Somewhere nearby, someone sweeps old rushes into piles with a stiff broom. The dusty herbal scent drifts through the corridor briefly before vanishing again beneath smoke and cold stone. You make your way toward a narrow stair leading upward to the battlements. The steps are slick with frost. At the top, icy wind greets you immediately. You emerge onto the castle wall just as the eastern horizon begins paling faintly beneath heavy clouds. Dawn approaches slowly across the valley, turning the mist below from black to silver. The cold here is astonishing. It slices through wool and cloak alike, sharp enough to sting your lungs when you breathe. Frost whitens the battlements. Snow crunches beneath your boots. Nearby, a guard wrapped in 2 cloaks warms stiff hands around a lantern while muttering complaints at the sunrise. "Beautiful morning," you offer quietly. He snorts. Beautiful mornings are warmer. A fair point. The battlements stretch away in both directions, narrow and windswept above the sleeping world below. Watchfires smoulder faintly in iron baskets mounted along the wall. Beyond them, forests darken the hillsides while the river twists pale through drifting fog. You walk slowly beside the parapet. The castle below you now resembles a tiny city awakening from sleep. Smoke begins rising from kitchen chimneys. Stable doors open. Servants cross the yard carrying water from the well. Somewhere deep inside the keep, another bell begins ringing for early prayers. The sound drifts beautifully across the frozen air. Some swear dawn bells protect castles from misfortune throughout the day. Others claim they merely wake everyone before the fires go out. Both explanations seem plausible. A pair of ravens lands heavily atop the nearest tower, feathers black against the whitening sky. One guard immediately spits over the wall for luck. Bad sign, you ask. Ravens near dawn after storms, he mutters darkly. And what does it mean? The guard shrugs. No one knows, but my grandmother hated it. An entire summary of medieval superstition in one sentence. Far below in the yard, the scruffy brown dog trots proudly beside a servant carrying kitchen scraps. Clearly the creature has aligned itself successfully with breakfast opportunities. A survival strategy worthy of admiration. The eastern sky brightens further now, pale gold beginning to edge the clouds beyond the hills. Frost sparkles faintly across every rooftop and stone ledge. The castle breathes smoke into the cold morning air like some enormous sleeping beast reluctant to wake. Beside the western tower, another guard pours ale from a leather flask into a wooden cup and offers you some. You accept gratefully. The drink is bitter and far too early for good decisions, which makes it perfectly appropriate for medieval dawn watch. Below, monastery bells answer faintly from somewhere beyond the valley. One, then another farther away. A chain of distant voices speaking through fog and winter fields. You lean against the freezing stone parapet and watch morning slowly gather over the land while the castle awakens beneath you, ancient walls glowing softly beneath the first uncertain light of dawn. The dawn arrives slowly, reluctantly, as though the sun itself doubts the wisdom of facing such cold. Pale gold light spreads across the frosted valley in thin layers, catching on the river mist below and turning the castle towers softly silver at their edges. From the battlements, you watch smoke rise from chimneys one by one while the fortress fully wakes beneath you. The guard beside you yawns hard enough to alarm a nearby raven. Longest season in the world, he mutters into his cup. Winter. Morning. An understandable opinion from someone who has spent the night standing in freezing wind. Below, the castle yard stirs into motion. Stable hands lead steaming horses toward troughs chopped free from ice. Kitchen servants hurry across the bailey balancing baskets beneath their cloaks. Two sleepy boys drag fresh bundles of rushes toward the hall entrance while arguing quietly about whose turn it is to scrape the old ones away. You can almost smell the kitchens from up here now, wood smoke, boiling oats, onions, and fresh bread beginning to warm beside the ovens. A dangerous temptation, your stomach notices immediately. The guard finishes his ale and rubs frost from his beard. Breakfast soon. Those may be the most beautiful words spoken in medieval history. You descend from the battlements carefully, boots slipping once on the frozen stair. The castle interior feels warmer after the wall-top wind, though only by comparison. Stone passages still hold deep pockets of cold air where draughts creep endlessly through cracks and stairwells. Servants flow around you in steady currents now. A woman carrying folded blankets hurries toward the guest rooms. Two boys wrestle a barrel through a doorway while an older steward follows behind, criticizing both their speed and their existence simultaneously. Somewhere nearby, a cook shouts loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Morning labour has begun. You pass the fever room corridor again. The chalk mark still sits beside the door. A healer emerges quietly carrying steaming cloths and a bowl smelling sharply of vinegar and herbs. She nods tiredly at you before disappearing toward the chapel stairs. Winter sickness continues its patient work regardless of sunrise. Farther ahead, bells ring again from the chapel below. This time more voices answer them. Morning prayers. You pause briefly near the stairwell and hear the low rhythm of chanting drifting upward through the stone. Even exhausted servants crossing the corridor slow slightly at the sound. Prayer organises castle mornings almost as reliably as hunger does. Some swear beginning the day without hearing chapel bells invites terrible luck. Others simply prefer any excuse to stand still for 10 seconds before work begins. You continue toward the great hall. The doors stand open now, spilling warmth and noise into the passage. Inside, the hall has transformed entirely from last night's smoky feast atmosphere. Morning light filters dimly through high windows. Servants sweep old rushes into piles while others scatter fresh straw mixed with lavender and mint across the floor. Long tables are crowded not with drinkers and musicians now, but with sleepy retainers wrapped in cloaks around steaming bowls. The smell is glorious. Pottage again, naturally. Medieval kitchens never truly abandon pottage, but this version bubbles thick with oats, leeks, onion, and bits of salted pork floating through the broth like tiny miracles. You settle onto a bench near the hearth. Already the fire burns stronger than during the night, logs snapping loudly while warmth pushes back the lingering cold. A kitchen servant places a bowl before you without ceremony, followed by coarse bread still warm from the ovens. Steam curls upward into your face. You nearly become emotional about breakfast. Nearby, several guards from the night watch slump over their own bowls with the hollow expressions of men who have argued with freezing rain for 6 straight hours. One notices you. "Storm past," he says around a mouthful of bread. So I noticed. River flooded the lower road, though. Another groans. Merchants'll complain for weeks. Merchants complain when sunshine arrives too loudly. Entirely true. At the far hearth, a servant turns spit slowly over the embers while dogs gather hopefully nearby. The scruffy brown dog from the gatehouse appears among them, now looking deeply optimistic about life in general. Apparently breakfast has improved his outlook tremendously. You dip bread into the hot pottage and feel warmth spread slowly back through your hands, around you. The castle settles into its daytime rhythm bowls clattering, brooms scraping, boots crossing stone, firewood splitting somewhere outside. Morning light catches the smoke drifting near the rafters. For the first time since arriving, the castle feels almost comfortable. Not truly comfortable, of course. You're still inside a freezing medieval fortress where everyone smells faintly of wood smoke and damp wool. But the harshness has softened. Routine helps. People survive winters through routine as much as through food or fire. Across the hall, Brother Aldrich appears briefly near the chapel doorway carrying a stack of manuscripts under one arm. He notices you and offers a tiny nod before vanishing again into the corridors. You touch the little St. Christopher token still tucked safely into your sleeve. A merchant nearby begins telling exaggerated stories about river crossings farther south, where carts supposedly vanished into mud so deep only the horses' ears remained visible. No one entirely believes him. Still, several listeners lean closer anyway. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how terrible roads truly become during winter. Travellers always worsen conditions slightly afterward. It is part survival instinct, part storytelling instinct, and part simple human desire to make personal suffering sound impressive. You continue eating while sunlight slowly strengthens beyond the high windows. Outside the hall doors, the courtyard brightens into full morning at last. Snowmelt drips steadily from rooftops. Stable boys chase chickens away from feed sacks. Somewhere in the distance comes the rhythmic hammering of a smith beginning work. The castle is fully awake now. And yet exhaustion still lingers pleasantly around the edges of everything, as though the long stormy night has not entirely released its hold. The warmth of the hearth pulls gently at your eyelids once more. Your bowl empties. Your hands remain wrapped around its fading heat, and while servants sweep, bells ring, and winter sunlight slowly spreads across the ancient stones. You find yourself drifting into one of the quietest moments the castle has offered yet. The morning stretches onward in a slow, smoky haze of warmth, bells, and tired conversation. Around the great hall, people move with the heavy rhythm of those who have accepted winter as a permanent condition rather than a passing season. You remain near the hearth long after finishing your pottage. Honestly, leaving the fire now would feel deeply irresponsible. The hall has grown brighter since dawn, though the sunlight reaching through the narrow windows remains pale and weak. Dust and smoke drift lazily beneath the rafters. Fresh rushes soften the stone floor underfoot, carrying faint scents of lavender and mint whenever servants pass through them. A pair of kitchen boys argue beside the bread table over whose turn it is to fetch water from the well. Your turn? I nearly froze yesterday. You nearly freeze every day. A difficult argument to refute in this castle. Nearby, several older retainers sit wrapped in blankets beside the wall, quietly repairing gloves, sharpening knives, or simply warming stiff hands around cups of ale. Medieval winter encourages stillness whenever possible. Every unnecessary movement spends warmth your body may not easily regain. You understand that instinct now. Outside the hall doors, the courtyard glows silver beneath weak sunlight. Frost still clings stubbornly to shaded stones despite the morning activity. Servants cross constantly between kitchens, stables, and storage rooms carrying baskets, barrels, and bundles of firewood. The castle breathes through labour. Every warm room depends on someone hauling wood. Every meal depends on someone waking before dawn. Every surviving winter depends on endless small tasks repeated faithfully day after day. A servant woman pauses near the hearth to shake snowmelt from a wool blanket before hanging it beside the fire. Steam rises slowly from the fabric. You slept in the upper chambers, she asks. You nod. Drafty. Very. She laughs softly, means the walls still stand. Another surprisingly practical medieval philosophy. At the far end of the hall, a steward reads inventory lists to two exhausted scribes who record everything carefully onto wax tablets: salted fish, grain sacks, firewood stores, ale barrels, candle wax, oats, dried peas. Winter turns castles into giant machines designed entirely around counting supplies. Some swear harsh winters can be predicted by how early stewards begin worrying aloud about flour. Judging by the steward's expression, disaster may already be upon you. The great hall doors open briefly as a burst of cold air enters alongside several travellers arriving from nearby villages. Their cloaks are white with frost. One carries a basket of eggs wrapped carefully in cloth. Another holds tiny carved saints meant for the chapel shrine. The scruffy brown dog immediately appears to inspect them for edible opportunities. An admirable level of professional dedication. You rise at last from the hearth and wander slowly toward one of the side alcoves overlooking the courtyard below. Here, away from the loudest conversations, the castle feels calmer. Sunlight spills across the stone ledge beneath the window. You sit there quietly. Below, stable boys spread fresh straw while horses steam gently in the cold air. A blacksmith works near the lower yard, each hammer strike ringing sharply through the morning. Ravens hop along the battlements searching for scraps. And everywhere there is smoke. Thin blue smoke curling from chimneys. Smoke trapped beneath the hall rafters. Smoke clinging to wool, hair, blankets, skin, tapestries, beams, and stone. After enough time inside a medieval castle, you suspect even dreams begin smelling faintly of firewood. Footsteps approach softly behind you. Brother Aldrich lowers himself carefully onto the bench nearby with the weary sound of ancient joints protesting civilization. You survive the night, he says. Barely. The monk nods approvingly as though this is the proper amount of suffering. He carries a small cloth bundle tied with string. Opening it reveals slices of dark bread, a bit of white cheese, and dried apples wrinkled nearly beyond recognition. Winter luxury, he says. You share the simple meal together while watching the courtyard. The cheese tastes sharp and salty. The apples chewy but sweet enough to feel almost festive. Somewhere below, a servant slips on ice beside the well and loudly blames a saint for failing to intervene. Brother Aldrich sighs. People always become more religious while falling. Reasonable, honestly. The monk points toward the western wall where sunlight catches frost along the stone. Castle looks peaceful now. It didn't last night. Nothing ever does at night. You glance toward him. You speak as though the castle changes after dark. It does. He says this so calmly that for a moment you're unsure whether he means spiritually, emotionally, or architecturally. Perhaps all three. Brother Aldrich brushes crumbs from his robe sleeves. Ink stains remain permanently dark along the cuffs. When I was younger, he says quietly, I believed castles were places of power. And now I think they are places where people try very hard not to be cold. You look round the hall again. The steaming bowls, the layered blankets, the crowded fires, the endless movement of servants carrying wood and food, the tired guards warming frozen hands, the chapel candles, the herb bundles over doorways, the dog sleeping beside the hearth. And somehow the monk's explanation feels more truthful than any grand tale of kings or battles. No one can quite agree whether castles are symbols of strength, fear, wealth, survival, or loneliness. Perhaps they are simply shelters against winter. The bells ring again, softer now in the late morning light. People cross themselves automatically. A servant begins trimming candle wicks near the chapel alcove. Another shakes fresh herbs into the rushes. Somewhere upstairs, someone finally opens shutters that remained closed through the storm. Light spills gradually deeper into the ancient stone halls. You feel warmth settling heavier around your eyelids now. Not exhaustion exactly. Something softer. The kind of deep tiredness that follows storms. Long travel, full stomachs, and surviving cold nights beneath thick blankets. Brother Aldrich notices your expression and smiles faintly. Sleep comes easier after difficult weather? You lean back against the stone beside the window. Beyond the courtyard walls, the valley lies quiet beneath drifting winter mist. The river glimmers faintly through bare trees. Smoke rises from distant cottages hidden among the hills. Inside the castle, the fires crackle steadily. Voices soften. The long night feels very far away now. And slowly, wrapped in warmth, smoke, old stone, and the gentle rhythm of medieval morning life, the castle begins feeling less like a fortress, and more like a place where you might finally rest. The day drifts quietly onward, though inside the castle it hardly matters whether the hour belongs to morning or afternoon. Winter light remains dim and silver beyond the windows, and the hearth fires continue burning steadily, as though determined to protect the fragile warmth gathered inside these ancient walls. You remain beside the alcove window long after Brother Aldrich leaves for his duties below. The monk disappears down the corridor carrying his manuscripts beneath one arm, moving slowly through drifting smoke and pale sunlight until the castle swallows him once again into its endless passages. Around you, the great hall settles into softer rhythms. The loud breakfast noise fades. Servants finish sweeping the rushes. Guards rotate shifts. A few travellers doze quietly near the fire with cloaks pulled over their shoulders. Even the dogs seem calmer now, curled into warm corners beneath benches while the scent of wood smoke hangs gently in the air. Outside the windows, frost begins melting from the battlements in tiny silver drops. The valley beyond the castle walls lies still beneath low drifting mist. Forests darken the hillsides. The river moves slowly through pale winter light, half hidden beneath fog. Everything feels quieter now, as though the storm exhausted not only the castle, but the entire world around it. You rise eventually and wander slowly from the hall, not out of purpose, but simple, tired curiosity. The corridors no longer feel cold and threatening the way they did during the night. Instead, they feel worn, familiar, almost gentle. You pass servants folding blankets near the upper gallery. A stable boy naps briefly beside a stack of firewood before a steward wakes him with impressive disappointment. Somewhere distant, chapel bells mark another hour. The sound rolls softly through the stone passages like warm water. You climb one final stair toward the upper chamber wing. Your boots move more slowly now. The castle itself seems slower too. No rushing footsteps, no storm winds, only quiet movement, soft voices, and the faint crackling of fires hidden beyond thick walls. At your chamber door, you pause. The little iron nail above the frame still catches a sliver of pale light. For luck, you enter quietly. The room greets you with familiar smells, now old straw, cold stone, wool blankets, fading lavender, ashes in the brazier. Not pleasant exactly, but no longer uncomfortable either. Your cloak hangs drying beside the wall. The extra blanket Brother Aldrich lent you rests folded carefully atop the bed. Outside the shutters, weak sunlight glows across the valley one final time before evening clouds slowly begin gathering again. Winter never rests long. You sit on the edge of the bed and listen. The castle murmurs around you softly. Somewhere below, dishes clink faintly in the kitchens. A horse stamps inside the stable yard. Wind brushes lightly against the outer walls. Far away, bells drift once more across the valley. Nothing dramatic happens now. No strange cries. No storms. No hurried footsteps outside the door. Only the simple, steady sounds of people surviving another winter day together beneath old stone walls. And somehow that quietness feels more comforting than any grand firelit feast or heroic tale ever could. You remove your boots slowly and lower yourself beneath the blankets once more. This time the bedding is already warm from the lingering heat trapped inside the wool. The straw mattress rustles softly beneath you. The heavy blanket settles across your shoulders like gentle weight pulling you safely downward toward rest. Outside, daylight fades little by little. The chamber darkens. Shadows soften along the walls. You leave the shutters slightly open now. Through the narrow gap you can see the evening mist beginning to gather once again over the river below. Tiny watchfires flicker along the outer walls as guards prepare for another long night. The castle continues breathing around you. Ancient, patient, tired. You think about the muddy road leading here through snow and rain, the smoky great hall, the chanting beneath the chapel stones, the gatehouse brazier glowing against the storm, Brother Aldrich's herb-scented chamber, the dogs sleeping beside the fire, the ravens on the battlements at dawn. Small moments. Quiet moments. The sort of moments medieval life is truly made from. Not battles or kings, but warmth shared beside fires, fresh bread after cold roads, lantern light in dark corridors, blankets against winter wind, people carrying on because there is nothing else to do. Your breathing slows gently beneath the blankets. Outside the chamber, the corridor grows silent. Even the castle seems ready for sleep again. The wind no longer howls tonight. It only whispers softly along the battlements and towers, moving through cracks in the stone with the calm voice of something ancient and familiar. You close your eyes, and slowly, the world beyond the blankets begins fading. The hall fires dim into distant orange glow. The bells drift farther away across the valley. The footsteps, voices, smoke, and winter air all soften into one long gentle hush. You no longer feel the cold stone beneath the castle. Only warmth. Only quiet. Only the slow, peaceful feeling of resting safely inside thick walls while winter settles softly outside. And as sleep finally gathers around you completely, the old medieval castle grows still and dim and far away, until all that remains is the comforting sound of faint wind beyond the shutters and the distant ringing of bells somewhere out in the snowy dark. The night holds you gently now. The fires burn low. The valley disappears beneath mist. And beneath wool blankets in a cold ancient chamber high above the sleeping world, you drift at last into deep and dreamless rest.